Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is my buddy Bill Demain. Ernest Tubb's record shop in Nashville has been sold, and Bill's going to tell you why it's such a huge loss to the country music community.
Basically, I think a lot of people would go into that shop and not really know first who Ernest Tubb was or what he did in country music, and I think it's worth remembering that he was a huge star. I mean, from the '40s through the '60s. If you don't know his sound, he had a very low voice and kind of monotone. He wasn't a great singer, but he had a real sound and style. You always knew it was him. Songs like "Walking the Floor Over You" and "Driving Nails in My Coffin," um, and he was a road dog. He and his band, the Texas Troubadours, they get in their green bus and just go out, play like 200 dates a year. And it was during the course of that, in about 1947, he's stopping in all these small towns, and he's like an early version of Garth Brooks, where he's really personable. After the show, he puts a folding chair down, line of people, signs autographs, takes photo. He's just like nice, really nice, personable guy. But he notices that he starts hearing the same question over and over again, which is, I sure love your music. Where can I buy your records? Or where can I buy records by the Louvin Brothers or Minnie Pearl? And I think that's the thing that to frame Ernest Tubb's importance in his store, it's worth remembering that in the late '40s, it wasn't easy to find country and western or hillbilly records. A lot of them were made for smaller labels that didn't have distribution. Stores above the Mason-Dixon line tended to look down their noses at that music and wouldn't carry it or stock it. So really, Ernest came back from one of his trips and said, I'm going to make it easier for folks to find these records that they can't find. So he started a mail order record business in 1947. And the catch there was that records were still 78s, slate, wax, and cotton, basically. And he made a guarantee because, again, he was a good guy. He's like, don't worry, folks, if you get a record in the mail and it's broken, I'll replace it for free. 50% of the records he mailed out in the first 2 years broke. And he was losing so much money, it really looked like this is not going to work, And then really the thing that kind of saved him was the advent of the 45, which was still breakable, but not nearly as breakable. You could send it through the mail. And once that started to catch on as the kind of, like coin of the realm of that day, his business started to flourish. And then he opened a brick and mortar store in 1949 over near where the public library is now on 7th and Commerce. That did well enough that he enlarged the store, and then in '51, he opened the store on Lower Broadway. So that store is the oldest surviving business on Lower Broadway. And it's really, Tootsie's aside, it's really the only connection, I think, that Lower Broadway in Nashville has to old country music. And the store has had its ups and downs, certainly in the last 20 years because of the way the record business has been. And, there's been a comeback of vinyl, which has helped the store. But I think because it's surrounded by all these tourist bars and stuff, it's almost like an anomaly or an outlier. It's like, what is this place doing here? And a lot of people just walk right by it. So it was good news 2 years ago when Jesse Lee from Roberts bought it with the intention of restoring it and kind of preserving the legacy. And right after he bought it, the store started to look better. Like this, the stock was up. There were more folks coming through. And on my walking tours, I would go in there. I was like, all right, this is great. I mean, this place is going to make it, against all odds. And then this week or last week, there was an article ran in a few different papers that it had been sold. And, they always make it sort of like vague enough where you think, well, maybe somebody will buy it and preserve it, but that's not going to be the case. I mean, a developer bought it, which means they're going to make it into a business that's going to make them a lot of money back, because I'm sure they paid millions and millions for it. But backing up, So, Ernest Tubb, I think what's worth remembering is that he had a big hand in making country music respectable, because when people saw that, it could sell, that country music could sell, and it sort of had this little fortress in his store where it was being celebrated, then other stores, I think, were more apt to say, this stuff is okay. Like, we'll carry it. I always think, if you see a Blake Shelton record in Target, I think that's a direct result of Ernest Tubb and what he did, And also, it's important to say that he had the Midnight Jamboree, which was a show that was every Saturday night after the Opry, little stage still in the back of the store. Everybody, Elvis, Hank, Loretta, everybody was on that stage, So to lose all that is really, it's just especially heartbreaking for me because that's part of my tour, but I think for the city at large, it's a huge loss. I think that particular arithmetic is proving that we're willing to let things go, and now things are dwindling. It's like, well, how much is really left that we can afford to lose before Nashville is like, well, what made this famous and what of that is still here to see, I saw shows there, and two things pop out that I'm particularly fond of remembering. That about 3 or 4 years ago, on Saturday afternoons, Leon Rhodes, who was Ernest Tubb's original guitar player, who was then in his 80s and had, suffered some arthritis and stuff, would set up on that little stage on Saturday afternoons and play, And I mean, it was just so wonderful to see this old guy with his Telecaster up there, like playing country music, and they'd have different singers get up there and sing, old country hits with him. And then more recently, last summer, when I had resumed doing the tours after the pandemic, we were in there one Saturday, me and a small group, and Marty Stewart and Connie Smith were in there. And it turned out that Marty was shooting a video for Connie, who was about to release a new record. And all of the folks in my walking tour got to be extras in that video. So, I mean, think about it. It's like you come to Nashville, you're a country fan, and you end up in a video that you can see on CMT. I mean, that's really special, I think. And now that won't happen, So, yeah, the marquee, which has been there since the early 60s, is beautiful. I mean, that just visually, that your eye goes right to that on Lower Broadway, because it's obviously authentic, not just like some sort of newfangled neon. Inside the shop, I was always fascinated by the Nathan Turk and Nudi's costumes. Just it's great to be up close to them, and they weren't behind glass like they are in the Country Music Hall of Fame, so you could actually really see the needlework and the rhinestones and stuff. And what always struck me, and it strikes me when I go through the Hall of Fame too, is like how little everybody was. It's like these, they look like they're like kids, like the weight, like a 27-inch waist, and I guess just being on the road and probably lots of amphetamines and that. And there was also an old upright piano in there that belonged to this guy named Moon Mullican, who was a big star of the Opry, like incredible sort of barrel house piano player. So I was also told, and I never got to go upstairs, but they owned the upstairs too. And apparently there was a lot of stuff up there that they didn't bring down to display, like instruments and stuff. So who's going to get all that? I don't know, Well, I think like the Grand Ole Opry, they had the benefit of the WSM radio antenna, which was 50,000 watts, clear channel. You think about the airwaves in the 30s through the 50s, they weren't that crowded yet. So a station with that much wattage on a clear night, you could hear it in Detroit or, Tallahassee, or even, I've read that people could pick up the Opry in San Francisco, which seems incredible, but I think it's true. So yeah, the reach of Ernest Tubb's Midnight Jamboree was the same, Another artifact too. Um, you probably know that when they filmed Coal Miner's Daughter, Ernest was still alive, and he had a big hand in bringing Loretta to Nashville in the early '60s, and he played himself in the movie. So there were some candid photos on the walls of him and Sissy Spacek, like during the filming that was really great, you know. Yeah, I mean, when the sale was announced, the news articles were pretty vague about the reason why that the sale was being made. But one can only suspect, given what's been going on in Nashville the last 5 years, that it definitely has something to do with economics and the incredible value of those properties on Lower Broad. I'm sure that developers have been circling around that place for years, you know, because it's sort of like, okay, we've got, you know, all the country stars have their own bars. They're doing bang up business. We're making tons of money. Can't we have this place too? You know, just be like one more. So, yeah, I don't know. In the future, we may find out more reasons about why the sale was made. Maybe the person who bought it just didn't have time to be the caretaker. You know, that would have been a full-time gig. Him just being, you know, notable because he was a country singer, a music star, and very popular. But I think you can't underestimate his contribution as a kind of marketing person, you know, who believed in country music and thought, like, we can sort of get it all together under one roof, and that togetherness will provide us with a kind of united front, which will make the music easier to sell. You know, it's remarkable.